All right, good day, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. This is Lars Light from the Somm Journal, welcoming you to Technique or Terroir, the latest in our Geographical Digest webinar series. I'd like to thank Somm Journal, our publisher Meredith May, the SommCon group, as well as National Geographic, who's teamed up to bring you this beautiful educational experience. And I'm going to get right into our theme, Technique or Terroir. If we've heard it once, we've heard it a million times. Wine is made in the vineyard. If that's the truth, if that's the real full story, then why do we need winemakers? What is the role of a winemaker once she's got great fruit? Is he just to chaperone it? Or is he to be like this guy over here, the Sorcerer's Apprentice, and work some magic to bring it all together? What's the balance? And we're going to ask this wonderful team of winemakers and wine specialists and vineyard experts, how do they balance it in their vineyards? So first up, to jump right into it, is Vitalie Tattinger, familiar name to all of us. Vitalie is one of the she's the granddaughter of the founder, the eldest daughter of the current president, Pierre-Emmanuel Tattinger, has a great passion for drawing, painting, and design, and parlayed her education at the School of Design into first her own business and then brought it home to her own family firm. So as one of the few remaining family-operated champagne houses. So Vitalie, tell us, I think that sometimes we might think that champagne is the ultimate example of technique because of everything that goes involved in securing those bubbles in the bottle. But tell us how you balance technique and terroir.
Hi, thank you, Lars. It's very gentle to you to invite me to speak about this beautiful topic. I think they are not in competition, and terroir and technique are in champagne fascinating question. I will speak maybe only for Tattinger because each approach is very different, but at home, and I will share with you some images because I think that seeing my face is not the most exciting thing. So share. You got it?
Yep.
So you told that very nicely. It's a family company. We are working with my brother Clovis and my father in since many years. My father rebought it recently after having worked more 30 years in. He rebought it in 2006, and with my father and with my brother Clovis, we joined him to learn how to work in a champagne house. And finally, I took the presidents last year, just at the beginning of the COVID crisis. So now I've got everything in the hands with my brother Clovis. And this question is very central because for us, the vineyard is very prominent. We are owner of 288 hectares. So we are the third largest vineyard in Champagne. And we really think that everything is starting from there. So this is a major point for us. This vineyard is now worked by a wonderful woman. Her name is Christelle Rainville. She has the enormous responsibility of the aim of the family, which is to really work with the respect of the environment. I think that since my father rebought the company about 14 years ago, this is the main question, and he took very strong resolutions. He really encouraged the fact that herbs are coming back in the vineyards. So it's a lot of work for the people they are working into the vineyard, because the work of the soil is really more painful, but this is very important to really keep the diversity in the soil to really keep the life in the soil. And now we are about 100% in environment, which is a very strong result. We are very proud about. And also, we decided very long time ago to really adapt the things we are putting in the soils regarding very specifically each terroir. I think that you know perfectly well that the Champagne is a large region, and our vineyard is based in Aube, in Marne, so in Montagne de Reims, in Côte des Blancs, and you have many differences. So we have really to adapt and to pay attention to the differences we can have on soils, climate, people, and everything. So this is for us hyper important. The main factor also in the vineyard is the fact that the people they are working in are there since many years. I think for each one, they are spending their whole life working this vineyard specifically. So they know very well, and they work with no fear. We are behind them. We support them. When you have a bad year, we are not telling anything because we know perfectly well that they are doing their best. And this is very important, this human fact in the sustainability, because this make the thing more easy. When you know your child, you are doing something very adapted to this child, and you are not treating all the children in the same way. So we consider that in the vineyards, this is totally the same. So with its huge work, we obtained, I think that 4 years ago, it was 4 years ago, all the label, all the charts of sustainable viticulture in Champagne and high environmental value, level 3, which is really, I think, the best practices you can have in Champagne, and which are different than being in bio or in biodynamic. But for us, this is, we want to stay free, and we are not convinced about the two other ways. So we continue to be free, to do our best, and we are a family. Our aim is to really transmit to the next generation the best we can. So consciently, it's not possible to do a bad job. We are just hyper engaged to give them the best. So after, with Champagne, you know, even this is a region which is focused on blending crus, blending years, blending even some different wines, because for the rosé, you can play with Pinot Noir vinified in red wine too. Even if we are the region of blending, the aim is not to erase the terroir, this notion of terroir. You were telling that I started my career being studying art, and for me this is exactly the same. We are playing with a beautiful palette of shapes, and we are really keeping the notes of each terroir to build a project which corresponds to the writing we love at Tétanger. So you have the family which decides the styles, which decide the stories they want to tell about. Then after, we are choosing the cru with the chef de cave and also the chef of the vineyards to really be faithful to these perfect writings, perfect style. So this is really a work which is made hand in hands. I think that now the chef of the vineyards, Christelle Rainville, knows perfectly well what we are expecting from each cru, where will go the work of each cru, in which cuvée. So she is playing very precisely when it's time to harvest, with the maturity and the aim is really to obtain the taste which is very typical of each terroir, to have this in our palates to be able to play with after. And after, speaking very closely with the chef de cave, the cellar master, he takes the rest of the work for him, and he is playing very also with a wonderful winery for that. So I will explain more the winery, which has been done tailor-made in 2011.
You've got a minute to do that.
1 minute. Oh.
Yeah.
So 1 minute. So he has done a job to be able to separate each cru and to be able to blend it very, very smartly. So I just forgot to play with the images, but just show you that. And the aim of that is really to, it's not to enhance the work of each one. For us, the keywords, it's the teamwork. And I think that the chef de cave is really there to reveal the terroir at his best and to play with the style of the cuvée. For example, for the Comte de Champagne, to play with a little touch of wood. For some cuvées, which a palette of 35 cru, like Brut la Française. For the rosé, to play with the Pinot Noir, the Chardonnay, and the Pinot Meunier with a touch of Pinot Noir vinified in red wine. So he is doing this adjustment game to obtain cuvées that correspond to family taste and pleasure.
Fantastic.
It's a very hard exercise to explain you that in 10 minutes.
I know, but you did a splendid job. Thank you. One very fast question for you, Vitaly. What is the percentage of the vineyards that your family controls, that owns directly?
We are controlling 288 hectares, and this represents maybe the half of the production. So the rest is to do with all the wine growers we are working very closely with.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. That gives you.
No, thank you. Thank you for giving me the time, and have pleasure for the rest of the panel.
All right. Merci.
Merci beaucoup.
All right, now we going to New Zealand. The early riser this morning, the person who gets the prize for having woke up the earliest is Hamish Clark, or actually been ready the earliest. Senior winemaker at the St. Clair family estate in New Zealand. Hamish is a Marlborough native. Very cool. Didn't have to go too far, but I know you studied microbiology and you did a stint working in DNA forensics at the UK Home Office. That's pretty fascinating. I'd love to hear how you relate that to your winemaking experience. You went to St. Clair in 2001, started as a lab manager, which makes sense from the forensic side, cellar hand, then red winemaker, and now you're a senior winemaker leading the team, which is fantastic. And I know that your role includes a lot of presence in the vineyard and harvesting decisions. So talk to us a little bit about how in New Zealand you're balancing technique and the technique and terroir mix. Good morning, Hamish.
Thank you, Lars. Thank you. Yes, well, yeah, interesting start to my career. Yep, as you mentioned, born and bred in Marlborough, and I've seen the Stallion go from having basically no grapes to one that is now just smothered from one edge to the other. I've been fortunate enough to have got into it in an early enough stage to understand, I guess, how and where some of the grapes from St. Clair have come from, and sort of what makes those important. I am sorry, I am just trying to start my slideshow. Here we go. So a little bit of back history about St. Clair. Neil and Judy Ibbotson started St. Clair, the company, back in 1978.
The slideshow's still not up.
Oh, is it still not? Sorry.
Yep.
So anyway, back in 1978, Neil and Judy Ibbotson. It's just coming up kids wake up time. I've got my my 7-year-old here that's just climbed out of bed trying to get onto my knee.
She might be able to help us with the PowerPoint, probably understands it more than
me. Yeah, hopefully. So is that better?
Yep, great.
Up and running, that's good. So 78 Neil and Judy planted grapes here, putting a little bit of perspective into that. The very first commercial plantings were planted back in 1974. So Neil and Judy, the owners of St. Clair, have been really sort of part of the pioneering family or group of people that have discovered Marlborough, I guess. And we've really fast-tracked our way through the years. The late 1990s was really when Marlborough started to explode. We discovered a special little area in a place called Dillon's Point, which is east of the township of Blenheim, quite close to the ocean. Very, very fertile soils down there. And this was an area that back in the day wasn't considered suitable for planting grapes. We have very quickly learned, and it's really within one generation of wine growing, we've learned that Sauvignon Blanc grown in Marlborough, if it's given the ability on high fertile soils, really it turbocharges the flavors. There's a group of compounds that highly expresses if it's given fertile soils. And this kind of goes against the grain a little bit. You kind of think of a lot of other varieties, and those varieties tend to perform better if they are planted in soils that make the vine work a little harder. Sauvignon Blanc, as we understand at St. Clair, Sauvignon Blanc, if it's given high nutrient soils, we're literally getting an expression that is supercharged, essentially. A little map to the side there. It gives you a rough overview of the valley. We've got the Awatere Valley to the south, a little bit colder, a little bit windier, not as nutrient-rich soils. We have a few plantings over that side of the valley, but the majority of our plantings are in the Wairau Valley. You can see the little loop circle around the area of Dillon's Point. We discovered that back in the year 2000, and that's predominantly where we focus all of our grape sourcing for Sauvignon Blanc from. We've got plantings across the rest of the valley, but that's where we kind of look to. Now, some of the things that I think that makes this area particularly good, this used to be part of the historic floodplain. So as the upper catchments, as the mountains when they collected a lot of rainwater, that would be the area that used to flood. And year after year after year, loads of nutrient-rich soils deposited in that area. It wasn't until about the mid to late 90s that area started to be drained with lots of drainage channels and that sort of thing, and it did make it suitable for planting grapes. Dillon's Point. Now this is an area that really catapulted St. Clair into the limelight, and that was back in the late 90s, early 2000s. St. Clair was a very small company back in those days, but once we started receiving fruit from there, and it was a bit of a gamble, really. We didn't know what the expression was going to be like, but certainly after that first vintage, it became very apparent that this area was one that was producing flavors that the other parts of the valley were not seeing. It's very close to the ocean. We enjoy a very maritime climate. New Zealand generally is maritime, but this area in particular, it gets nice hot days, nice ripening conditions during the day, but with the Cloudy Bay area or the ocean very close by, it cools down quite rapidly at night. And this is all really important for acid retention, which contributes to flavor retention. I guess one of the things that we started to see back in those early 2000s was with that expression, we didn't understand why this area was producing flavors. And going back to the question, is it terroir or technique? This is very, very much about terroir. the way we produce these wines, we harvest the grapes and bring them in. We clear the juice, very clear. There's no lees work per se. And while I probably underpin the role of the winemakers a little bit, or understate them, I should say, is probably the better word. We're very careful with the ferments where we're using yeast that have been selected from the vineyard for their properties of being able to ferment cleanly and express some of the flavor compounds that this area is producing a huge amount of. There was a collaborative effort with the University of Bordeaux and one of the universities here in New Zealand, University of Auckland. Back in the early 2000s, it was unknown as to why this area was producing the characters that it was, and I guess the end result after a sort of year or two of research and study was that this area is giving these precursor compounds, the compounds that go on to be the tropical, the passion fruit, the grapefruit, etc. These precursor compounds were there in abundance, and that really started giving us some insight. And going back again, I think it's because lots of places in the world grow Sauvignon Blanc, but I think this is because these soils are very, very new. They carry a lot of fertility, and again, reflecting on the fact that, you know, I think this is probably one of the only grape varieties that, given high fertility and being allowed to crop heavier, gives it that emphasis. Where do I want to go next? Yeah, so I guess going back to the winemaking, we look after the ferments very carefully. We make sure that the flavors are preserved as much as we can. There's very, very little winemaking influence. These are very much about terroir-driven reflections. We keep each of our parcels separate. We don't have the benefit of generations worth of winemaking experience, and it's one of the things that the owners of St. Clair, Neil and Judy, they've spent a lot in developing and giving us tools as winemakers to be able to keep all these batches separate, so we can help or start to understand how, why, and where these flavors are coming from. And so within one generation, we've really been able to, I guess, hotspot or focus in on different parts of the valley that are conducive to varieties and best flavors and best expressions. I'm very quickly just going to zap out of the PowerPoint presentation.
Got a minute. You got a minute left.
Thank you. And just give the team just a wee bit of a view. Obviously, the highlighted area, Marlborough. Just to give everybody just a wee bit of an idea, Blenheim Township, the Duns Point area is east of the township here. And, you know, the whole valley is wall to wall with grapes across the board. What I want to emphasize here or underpin here is how uniform the canopy color is. You zap a little bit further up valley towards the Golden Mile, I guess they call it, which is where a lot of the early grape growing areas were produced. And you can already see from this high level, this is trails of the old braided river course. And
we're still seeing your slide, Don, but I'm sorry, that's it with time.
No, it's all good. Anyway, thank you all for tuning in, and hopefully I've been able to evolve or give you a little bit of insight into Marlborough.
Great. Now give that 7-year-old a hug.
Yeah,
the wine is beautiful. There's a beautiful creaminess to it as well.
No, thank you. Yeah, and this is true reflection of terroir. It really is. There's very little in terms of technique. It's careful winemaking, but there's no heavy-handed winemaking with it.
Beautiful. Thank you. All right, so now we're going to speak to a product of Texas terroir with Don Brady, native of Texas and studied at Texas Tech. And At one point, you were also involved in Texas winemaking and sort of put some Texas winemaking on the map there, which is pretty cool. And then you moved to Paso and were instrumental in establishing the base AVA. And you've been with Robert Hall from the start. What year did you start at Robert Hall? Not to date you, Don, but
you're dating me. 2001.
fantastic, great,
Yeah,
come a long way.
First turnkey vintage here.
All right, well, talk to us about Paso Terroir and how you present it, how you combine that in the winery with technique.
Oh, okay, great. Thanks, and thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'd like to do a brief introduction to Paso, and let's start out with the winery. It's doing the same thing. Okay, there you go. Okay, so and jump right into Robert Hall. Robert Hall founded the winery in 1999, and it was his lifelong, wine was his lifelong passion, and he was a dreamer. He built it and they came. He chose Paso Robles for its diverse, vibrant terroir, believed in working the land, learning the craft, improving on what we did every vintage. I joined Robert in the beginning in his quest to capture the essence of Paso, and which kind of leads into what is it that production or nature that makes our wines great? And we feel here it's a blend of the two. For sure, the wines are vineyard derived. Our wines are made in the vineyard. They're an artifact of the vineyard location, the soils found at the site, solid farming practice. And then once we receive here in the winery, it's our goal to keep things simple, keep everything separate. We have lots of small tanks, and determine quality, and then craft the wines using current technique, and match technique with the terroir, basically, because we do see differences in what we have. And Paso Robles here, back to the slide, we're just inland from the Pacific Ocean. Our geography, we're in a fold of the mountain, the coastal mountain range, and this mountain range is created by tectonic activity. It's the Pacific plate running into and under the North American plate that's uplifted the mountains here. The climates are very diverse depending on where you are with respect to the ocean. And generally, our climate can be described in a macro sense as a maritime climate with a Mediterranean rainfall pattern. There's almost no rainfall from May to September. And this year it's like it's stretched into December almost. So it's been we've had a dry year. The mountain parts of Paso can receive as high as 40 inches of rain, and the inland valleys as little as 10. Here again, because of this proximity to the ocean, Paso Robles enjoys the largest diurnal shift between daytime and nighttime temps anywhere in California. Elevations here range from 700 to 2,400 feet. And a few years ago, a group of us got together. Paso Robles is large. It's 614,000 acres, which is just doing the straight math, that's 800 square miles. It's a really large area. And we wanted to dig in and better define Paso Robles. And so we separated out different districts in Paso. And let's see if I can get this guy. There we go. Oh, we're jumping all over. Okay. Okay, so these are the 11 different districts that we came up with. And I tend to group these, and these are, we grow grapes here. We have about 130 acres of vineyards. They're all sustainably farmed. The growers that we work with are also sustainably farmed. We're at about an 85% level at this point. And so what I'd like to kind of do here is dig into how I like to think about these different districts found in Paso. And I'll start out with the Inland Valley districts. This is, for me, kind of the breadbasket. I haven't done the math, but I would expect this is where the greatest number of vineyard acres are. These are the Inland Valley districts. The soils are alluvial, sedimentary soils. The microclimates tend to be warmer. This is a region 3, Winkler region 3 to region 4. There's 10.5 to 15.5 inches of rain, and anywhere from 35 to 50 degree shift in temperature at night. So it's 105 during the day. It's do the math, 55 at night. So it cools down quite a bit. It makes it nice and fresh, helps us retain acidity. These areas, we get big, ripe, mature, fully ripened fruit flavors. This is there's a vineyard shot. So this is from my vineyard, and this is looking out across the Estrella River Valley, and you see a picture of the soil. He missed the rocks in this soil because these tend to be, they're pretty open soils. They drain very well. They're rocky, sandy, and it's a great place. They're not very rich, but it's a great place to grow grapes. And this is a great shot of those. So let's jump on to the mountain districts. And this is to the west and to the south of Paso. And these are typically uplifted calcareous seabed soils. And they're cooler. These are the coolest areas in Paso, region 2 to region 3, 20 to 30 inches of rain. And if you get back a little bit off of it, that's where you really see, back up here in the hills is where that 40-inch rainfall can occur. The change from day to night temps a little less here, 20 to 40 degree shift. Pretty good elevation here. You can be anywhere from 700 to 2,200 feet of elevation. These wines tend to be really dark fruit, spicy characters, great density of color and tannin structure. That can be sometimes angular, and so that's something that we manage here in the winery. And sometimes we're going to taste Cabernet today. There's vineyard sites here that are great for Cabernet. There's vineyard sites that are a little too cool for Cabernet. So, and then here's, there we go. Up. There we go. There's our vineyard pick, and you can see that shale soil, and then the hillside vineyards. And this is some really interesting fruit comes out of these spots. So now let's go to the inland hill districts. When these areas are kind of a mix of the two. We have there's patches of this uplifted seabed soils, and then there's also some sedimentary soils. It's kind of what's washed down out of the hills, and so it's kind of a mix of those. This is median heat to the warmest. That Paso Robles Highlands district is the warmest area in Paso, just because of proximity to the ocean. We have 10.5 to 15 inches of rain here, 20 to 50 degree shift in temps. So big range there. 750 to 2,100 feet of elevation. And these ones, once again, are ones that can tend to be angular and kind of really site dependent, really vibrant color, and typically firm tannins. So there's a picture that's a great picture of it. I can get back.
Got about a minute. Yeah, you got a minute left, Don.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, now let's taste Cabernet. So we've got our 2018 Robert Hall Cabernet. This is the blend that went into it from a district standpoint. And I think you see the big rock rich fruit that comes out of the inland valleys. And it's balanced with kind of the angularity and the structure that we see in the hill and mountain districts.
So you've really taken the terroir on a whole broader level there. Brought in all the different.
That's what we're trying to do, is look at these different areas of Paso, source fruit from them, learn from them, and go and get it where it's best. Do the same thing in our vineyards that we're farming, plant the right things there, and kind of take advantage of the diversity that we have here.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you, Don.
Thank you, and come see us in Paso.
All right. I promise we will.
Okay.
All right. I'm going to ask you. Great. Thank you very much. All right. So now we're going to go over to the wine is beautiful, by the way. Great spices, as you said, wonderful structure. So we're going to speak now with Dana Grande. Dana is the, I would say our titan of terroir here. Dana is a Sonoma native, studied viticulture, spent 13 years as vineyard manager at Jordan before taking a hiatus, and then recently returned as grower relations manager, very close relationships with the growers as well as the winemaker. So how do you sort of bring together the terroir and technique there, Dana, please?
Well, thank you so much for having us. I'm off of mute, right? You can hear me?
Yes, we can hear
Great.
you.
Thank you for inviting us to come and speak to everyone today. It's a real pleasure for us to do so. Oops. Sure. There we go. So this is an overview of the Jordan Estate property, and it's really the heart of our Jordan brand. We have our winery, our winemaking facility. We have our culinary department along with our gardens. We have hundreds of acres, about 1,200 acres total on the estate, and they're largely dedicated to wild habitat. So at Jordan, we take our environmental preservation responsibilities really seriously. We've been certified under the fish-friendly farming program since 2012. We've been recognized as a bee-friendly farming operation since 2013. And both the winery and the estate vineyards have been sustainably certified since 2019 under the CSWA, the California Sustainable Wine Growing Alliance. Our winery is run off our own solar generated power. We have been a green business member since the 90s. We take it seriously. But the majority of our fruit is actually purchased from trusted growers. And so the last several years, we've been working closely with all of them to certify their ranches as sustainable as well. And with the 2020 harvest, we actually are 100% sustainably certified in all of our Sonoma County growers. So 1,200 acres of land, only about 10% is planted to grapevines on our Jordan property. And you can see from these photos, what we try to do is we try to fit the vineyards within the natural landscape rather than, change the landscape to make it fit our vineyard footprint. So 1972, Tom and Sally Jordan bought the original Jordan property, founded the winery. Our first vintage was 1976. And back in the 70s, the idea was that control over the farming practices was thought to equate to maximum quality in the bottle. So in 2005, John Jordan, their son, took the leadership reins of the winery, and he shifted that philosophy to this quality without compromise. And what that means is that we're sourcing the best fruit for the best possible wine while we're staying true to our house style and our food-friendly roots. So terroir is generally focused on soils. We'd like to talk a lot about soils, but what I look for is the totality of the site, the environment, the weather, what viticulture practices play into it, and how all of those things contribute to the final wine lot from a specific vineyard. So our original vineyard planting in the 70s, we started in 72, was modeled after Tom Jordan's favorite wine, the Latour wines. So along with Cabernet Sauvignon, we planted Merlot, we planted Cabernet Franc, and Tom also wanted a certain level of, good old USA, American influence. And so we had a fairly large percentage of American oak, which for some of our greener Cabernet and Cabernet Franc sites, that actually kind of worked out a little bit. It masked the green. Our winemaking back then, quick, 5.5 days or so of fermentation in stainless steel. All of the lots were then blended together and aged in our oak cooperage. But in the late 80s and 90s, like most of Sonoma and Napa County growers, Jordan embarked on a replant program because of failures to phylloxera. So all of our viticulture practices changed as the replants became productive. We got smarter as an industry. We understood vineyards a little bit more, and we started farming better. But we're still asking kind of this question: do better farming techniques, better farming practices, better timing, does better viticulture impact the overall terroir? And for us, our answer is no. The influence of the site, its terroir, is way more influential than any viticulture practice can overcome. And that's why we changed our vineyard sourcing. And in 2012, John Jordan sold the original property. So where do we get our grapes from? We are Alexander Valley appellated for our Cabernet. It's kind of the northern end of Sonoma County, 32,500 acres. The elevation ranges from about 134 feet above sea level to over 2,500 feet, and grapes are grown at all different elevations here. But for us, the neighborhoods, you can see our little dark red here. These are our vineyards. This is the winery here. Our vineyards are best suited, the vineyards that are best suited for our Cabernet. We find them kind of in the central and northern parts of Alexander Valley. These sites have well-drained soils. They're warmer in the growing season, but they still have our Russian River influence with regards to the fog. This is the river running through the valley. So I came back in 2020. I came back to work with Maggie Cruz, our winemaker, and our growers. And one of the most interesting things for me to do was to walk vineyard rows with Maggie, especially close to harvest, so I could really understand what it is that she's looking for in all of these sites that we have. So in this area here, kind of this Geyserville area, northern part of our sourcing, it's the cherry, the black fruit, the boysenberry characters. I mean, these soils are pretty deep. The vines are balanced, really well balanced, but they don't really struggle. So you get these pretty soft characters and really beautiful fruit-driven lots come out of here. And then as we move south through the valley, we move on to some Cabernet that we purchased from some benchland. And these soils are thinner. The vines struggle a bit more here. They struggle a little more for water. They struggle for nutrients. They struggle for light in some cases. And this is where we get our structure. The tannins here, we kind of wait on them. If you pick them a little too early, you're going to be green, a little astringent. So we wait for those tannins to get fully mature before we harvest. And then as we move more southern into Alexander Valley, kind of along the base of the Yakima Mountains here, this is our Merlot area. And this is a really interesting area because these mountains change things over here. We get a lot more rain here. It's the highest area of rainfall in all of Alexander Valley. It's a little cooler. The soils are still pretty deep. They're a little more clay driven, but it allows for that roundness, that silkiness, that smoothness, that fleshiness that the Merlot contributes to our overall blend. And then if you come through here, here's the winery, and our Malbec and Petit Verdot come from the estate vineyard. Our blocks are planted on the Gwinnett soil series. It's a red rocky clay. They struggle a bit. The Malbec has got that bright cherry, that dark cherry and spice kind of character when it's fully ripe. And our Petit Verdot, we actually look for kind of that blueberry fresh fruit on it with a little bit of tannin to add to the mid-weight. We don't look for the true leather that we can get in a Petit Verdot sometimes. Sorry, I'm reading, because if I don't, I'll go over time.
Beautiful. Thank you. You even had a minute left.
So New Jordan, what do we do? Quality without compromise. We still farm about 120 acres. Anything that doesn't come into the Jordan blend, we sell to other wineries. We've changed a lot in technique in the vineyard, and we understand more how we can orient the rows to maximum sunlight without a lot of sun damage or too much sun on the fruit. We monitor soil moisture in different ways. We understand about how to water to where the root zone actually exists. We better understand how to make those vineyards that are a little bit variable in vine row a lot more uniform. So we know that the wine is made in the vineyard. We believe that very strongly. So what do we do with it when we bring it in? And I'm a viticulturist, but I will tell you, from all of the winemakers I've worked with, the most important thing they do is make the pick decision, right? You can't change it. Once you've made that decision and you bring it in, you're done, right? You can't put it back on. So we walk rows. Am I 10 minutes?
Yep.
Oh, okay. We walk rows and we taste in the winery. Taste. Maggie makes individual decisions on the lots, just as she does with the vineyards. So our 2016 Cabernet, beautiful wine, beautiful growing season, very cool actually, but an extraordinary season, nice length, really, really ripe uniform vineyard, uniform fruit in the vineyards that year. It was a gorgeous vintage.
Very nice, beautiful bright fruit as well.
Right, and really nicely integrated as far as our French oak program. So thank you for inviting me. Stay in touch with us. This is the way you can do that. And we appreciate your time today.
Great. Thank you, Dana. Very, sounds like Jordan's got a similar approach to Robert Hall in that going for the terroir of a territory rather than one specific site. That's pretty
agreed.
Well expressed. Thank you. So next up is Chris Benziger. Chris is a first-generation vintner. He's a transplant from White Plains, New York, not too far from where I'm sitting right now in the middle of a snowstorm. Chris studied marketing at the University of San Francisco, worked his breaks at the winery, did some sales, did some marketing, and now you're overseeing the home ranch. A lot of farm-related duties. I don't know if you consider yourself a farmer, Chris, but I understand that you look after the sheep and the cows, the vegetables and the fruit. Do some biodynamic prep, and they say you've definitely got the soil under your nails. So welcome, Chris.
Yeah, I've since washed my hands. Can you see my screen okay now?
Yep, just put it on presenter screen. We're good. There you go. Perfect.
There you go. Right on. Hey, so first of all, like everyone else, thank you so much for this opportunity. Very excited to be here, and I'd love to build on what Don was saying about geology, and then Dana's talk about sustainability. But first, let's do a bit of history here. We are definitely a family business, as you can kind of see here. I got 4 generations, 7 in mine. I got 4 brothers, 2 sisters, 19 nieces and nephews. One would say it's nepotism run amok, but it's a lot of free labor, and we've been working for over 40 years up here on this beautiful ranch on Sonoma Mountain. And here, what I kind of want to talk about is I'm firmly in the camp that it's terroir. That's what separates good from great. But how do we maximize that terroir? That's something that we've learned over our 40 years of farming here on Sonoma Mountain. And you can kind of see Sonoma Mountain behind us, that beautiful caldera, an extinct volcano, we seriously hope. And this ranch is kind of beautiful. You cup your hands, it's exactly what it looks like, a little hanging valley. the wine I want to show off today is our 2016 Sunny Slope wine. It's gorgeous, and it's a great example of the terroir of this part of Sonoma. And this part of Sonoma is unique. We're in the southern part of Sonoma, where Dana was up a little bit north. And when the weather comes off the Pacific, it comes across the Santa Rosa Plain, and there's nothing there. And then it hits Sonoma Mountain, and the wind kind of gets split. It gets either pushed up into Lake County or down through what's called the Petaluma Wind Gap, and it cools down the Caneros. But where we are, Sonoma Mountain protects it, and it kind of gets stuck between Sonoma Mountain and the Mayacamas Mountains, and it rolls around in there. It's kind of like a hot pocket, like that nasty snack food. Hot Pockets. Well, we got a kind of a nice weather hot pocket, which is perfect for Cabernet. And plus it's where the volcano blew up, and it created these amazing complex soil types, right? We kind of call it geological lasagna. The basement rock is basalt, then you get this red aggregate, then you get this beautiful ashy welded tufa, breccia, obsidian, incredible melange of different types of soil. But how do we maximize that? And when we first came out here in the late 70s, 80s, we were very traditional farmers back then. I called it kind of spray and pray. You talk to the Monsanto guy, right? You get a big bag of methyl ethyl bad stuff. You go put it in your nifty 50 spray rig and go nuke your vineyards, right? The problem with this is your pesticides just don't kill everything in the vine. It ends up, gravity takes it down onto the vineyard floor, and it kills the biggest biomass in the planet topsoil, right? So now the vines kind of retreat. You got to add chemical fertilizers down there, and you end up getting in this kind of horrible cycle of pesticides, fertilizer. So the root system of these plants are relatively shallow. They're in the top and subsoils, not down into that geological lasagna that we want, right? And this is what most of agriculture is in the world. Fortunately, in the wine business, we're changing our ways. And so what we do, instead of talking to the Monsanto guy, we talk to the scientists, the bug guys, the entomologists, and say, hey, is there another way to kill the leafhoppers instead of nuking them with chemicals? And there is. You got to find their natural predators. So we do, and this was a bit controversial when we first did it, is you got to clear land, right? So we have 85 acres up here on this home ranch. We cleared almost half of it out to plant biodiversity areas that Dana was talking about. We grow these gardens. We call them insectaries. Think of these as gigantic bug homes. They're like the Mardi Gras for insects, the eHarmony of the bug dating world. We grow these gardens, and they attract all these predatory insects that come in, and they do their thing, and then they go outside the vineyards to eat anything they want, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so they create these little environments in there, and we connect them with what we call habitat highways. But they start to build up these beautiful kind of populations of insects, and then of birds, hummingbirds, bluebirds, and even higher up the scale to raptors, owls. We have owl boxes all over here, over the vineyards. I mean, we have the most paranoid rodents in Sonoma County. But so that helps us eliminate the pesticides going inside the vineyards, right? So that's great. We haven't sprayed anything, but now we have to repair the soil. Unfortunately, farming is resource intensive. It's take. You end up depleting all that biological capital. We have to replace that. So we do it old school. We have a herd of cattle. These are Scottish Highlanders, kind of the original cow. Expect to see Mel Gibson there with his face half blue. But they kind of cruise the vineyard, and they give me a lot of manure, which is great. They're full of BS, about 50 pounds a day, and we compost this. And this eventually goes out to the vineyard over time. But the real workers are my sheep. I have a gigantic flock of dorpers. These are small sheep designed perfectly for the vineyard because they shed. And these guys cruise underneath the vineyards, and they graze. And in one step, the little cloven hooves are pushing debris down in the vineyard floor so the microbes and worms can eat it. They're kind of cleaning the vineyard floor, vacuuming it, if you will, and that prevents any mildew. They're eating underneath the vine, eliminating the grasses and the weeds under the vine. So now I don't have to spray any herbicides, Roundup, glyphosate, and they're pooping out the back end, increasing that fertilizer, helping repair the soil that was damaged from the previous generations, helping all the rhizomes and the fungi and all that fun stuff. So that's how we put that biological capital back in the soil. But what separates what we do from high level of sustainability and organics is this addition of what we call our biodynamic preparations. And that's where people like to make fun of it a little bit, but it's pretty cool. Basically, we have a few what we call field preps. We put manure in horns. We basically make a plant probiotic that we dig up and apply to the vineyards. And then we also have some herbal remedies that we put into our compost and eventually put that out. And these help with the metabolism of the grapevine and help the vine take in nutrients. But the idea is this, and this is a root study out of the University of Washington. We need to get our roots as deep as we can to take care of that great terroir that we're on here in Sonoma County and all these great areas around the world. And so the slide on the left is a vine that has been fed from the surface. It's like it's on an IV. It's being watered and fed from the top. So the root system is anemic, it's shallow. The grapes look fine, but you're growing water balloons, right? We want the vines on the right-hand side because you're going deep down into that geological lasagna. And this is, every time it goes through one of these bands of soil, they send out the root hairs, sending those minerals up into the grapes and eventually into the wine. So now we get wines like the one we have here that have that have more than just the fingerprint of the varietal. They have the fingerprint of the vintage. Because remember, every bottle of wine is a mini time capsule of that growing season. All the trials and tribulations are added to this bottle. They have the fingerprint of the terroir, obviously, and the fingerprint, the most elusive one, is of the winemaker. So now once we have these amazing grapes, we have to take care of them because now this is, we have to shepherd them in to the winery. We harvest at night. This is critical. So the fruit is in pristine shape. Colder fruit means that it's not damaged. They don't get squished. They don't leak juice. Then the only place that I use a lot of technology or any real technology is with optical sorter, lasers. Austin Power is not the only one. We got lasers here that track the grapes, but more importantly, what it does is it culls out any debris, no jacks, no leaves, and most importantly, raisins, because we ferment with natural yeasts, and those raisins would drop a bunch of sugar into the wine and mess up my wine chemistry. So by having that one little bit of technology, it really helps us out. But all this together with a little bit of barrel aging in the cellar will give us a wine that truly reflects what we're trying to do. And our whole arc of farming this way biodynamically is kind of a quote from Gandhi. It's first they ignored us, then they laughed at us, then they fought us, then you win. And it's kind of neat to see. And it took us almost 30 years because at first, nobody cared what we were doing. Then when they heard that we were clearing land to grow gardens, we had cows in the vineyard, sheep eating, we were dancing around with a full moon and had horns in the ground. They thought we were crazy. Then when we challenged everybody that was a better way to grow the grapes and make better wine, and this was a better way, they fought you a little bit because, traditions are traditions. But now, just like Dana said, Sonoma County, Napa County, most of California realizes the importance of sustainability because we're blessed with great soil here and we can truly get wines that can reflect that sense of place. So that's kind of our philosophy. And it runs not just through our estate wines, but through all of our Sonoma County wines where we have different growers. We farm over 200 acres, but I work with about 500 acres worth of growers. And we help put all these practices into their vineyards, whether it's full biodynamics, organics, or a high level of certified sustainability. All this to get those flavors into the wines. So I think I did it in 10 minutes.
You did it with 2 seconds to spare, Chris. Jeez. Wow. I'm not a smoker, but I feel like I need a cigarette now.
Sorry, was it too much? Was it too
No,
much?
That was awesome, Chris. Very, very well said. Well done. You asked me to you specifically asked me to give you a 2-minute warning. I don't know if you heard it, but you were in the zone, man.
I was in the zone. I didn't hear anything. I knew I had to be pretty quick with it, but thank you so much for the opportunity to give my side of the terroir equation versus
Fantastic.
technique.
All right. I want to apologize to Ralph Holdenried for having to follow that presentation. Ralph grew up on a family farm in Germany in Rheinhessen. I don't know if your family was quite as big as Chris's. I don't know if the population of Rheinhessen was quite as big as Chris's family. But Ralph studied winemaking and viticulture at Geisenheim and then went to UC Davis, where he became fascinated with California winemaking, and he's known to have specialized in small lot wines, especially in Napa. And he's now the director of winemaking for Black Stallion since 2004 in the Oak Knoll district. So Ralph, tell us a little bit about how you apply Technique or Terroir.
Yes, thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, hear you great.
Yeah, this is a tough act to follow. What a great presentation. Thank you. Thank you, Lars. Great to be here. I'm Ralph Holdenreid, winemaker, Black Stallion Estate. We are on the Silverado Trail over in Napa Valley in the Oak Knoll district. Right, let me quickly introduce. I can get to the next slide. Oh, how do I get to the next slide?
There should be an arrow there somewhere for you, or click your mouse or your cursor.
Okay, here we go. Sorry. Let me quickly introduce Black Stallion. Black Stallion actually was once an equestrian center here in Napa Valley. It was home of the only indoor horse riding arena. Now it's a beautiful winery, a great estate. We have about 30 acres reaching from the Silverado Trail down to the Napa Valley River. And it's a fantastic place, not only to make wine, but also to grow grapes. We have some great Cabernet Sauvignon that we are using in our estate fruit. And it's really exciting to especially talk to you about your topic, terroir and technique, because it really goes to the philosophy of winemaking. We heard so much passion already being shared, but you know how you translate what's given to you by the site, and then what techniques you're using to make the wine out of it, goes really to the core of winemaking and really to the philosophy of how we're doing things. So really excited to talk about it. At Black Stallion, we really believe in all of Napa Valley. So not just focusing on what we grow on the estate in Oak Knoll district. We are sourcing fruit from all over the Napa Valley, really, for our wines, for Cabernet Sauvignons, all the way in the north from Calistoga, Howell Mountain, all the way to Los Carneros in the southern part. And each of the vineyards is really distinct, and there's true terroir in every vineyard that I'm using in my blends, which is very exciting. And really, the vineyard provides the essence of the fruit, and my role is really to translate that back into the wine. So I'm however looking at a vineyard a little bit differently. I'm kind of trying to achieve a style, and I'm using almost terroir as a technique. So I'm choosing vineyards that really match what I envision putting into the blend in the end. So it's terroir can be a technique too, is my point. When it comes to vineyard selections, really try to be very careful. We've heard so much about the vineyard and the different sites already. And the great vineyard is not about the site alone to me. And the technique starts there as well in the farming practices and how you translate that potential of the vineyard into the grapes that are being grown. I think Chris mentioned how his fantastic, we work with a lot of sustainable farmers, and we are fully sustainable here at the winery as well. But really, the technique from a farming side is also not to be not mentioned, because you really need to translate all that's given to you from that site into the berries in the end. So I love to get involved when we talk about vineyards, also all the way from pruning, from the development of the vineyard, all the way to the harvest decision that really defines what the wine later on will be. So terroir really starts in the vineyard and translates the potential from the site to the grapes. And then once the grapes come to the winery, here's a picture of our Cabernet coming in. You really hope that all the potential of the wine is captured in these berries that you see there, in those grapes. And all the winemaker really has to do is to translate those into the glass. And in the process of doing that, you have many decisions to make, and similar to how Chris said, I'm starting with, I really want perfect ripe berries to go into the fermenter only. So I'm trying to eliminate raisins, underripe berries, stems, really from getting into the fermenter. And we're using techniques like sorting, optical sorting. We do hand sorting as well, to really achieve that. And that's just step one, so to speak. And then the whole host of like winemaking choices then follow. this is really just the start. And in the fermentation tank, there's a whole host of techniques to tease out, the flavors to go into the wine. And those choices start with the fermentation tank itself. I'm really getting into the weeds here, but what tank, how large your tank is, what material the tanks are made out of, all that has a different. We have some oak tanks, some concrete tanks, some stainless steel tanks, to really understand what their effect and their contribution to the wine that I'm making is. It's really surprising if you talk to 5 different winemakers just in Napa Valley alone. Everybody has their different techniques, and everybody therefore kind of creates their own signature style, so to speak. And I think all the differences we see in the wine, they don't come from the vineyard alone. I think there's a lot of like artisanal approach from the winemaker too that kind of contributes to that as well. And then kind of the key choices really happened to me, during the 30 days, during the core winemaking, after you receive the fruit, after the grapes are in the tank, during maceration and fermentation. There's an entire array of choices that define what the wine will be. It starts with, cold soak. I choose to do like 5 days of cold soak to really, bring the mid palate of the wine to life. Then whether we use punch downs or pump overs, how frequent, how many of those, that really influence kind of like the fruit expression, but also the tannin structure of the wine. All those contribute. The yeast selection, as was mentioned earlier as well, has a big impact. And for each of those levers really that you have in the winemaking toolbox, I'm trying to really tailor each of those levers to the vineyard itself. So for example, when I make a mountaintop Cabernet Sauvignon from Atlas Peak, I'm using very different techniques than I'm using for a Cabernet Sauvignon from our estate fruit here, which has little different tannin structure, a little more acidity, and different kind of fruit profile. So it's a lot of fun. Absolutely. After fermentation, the choices also don't end, obviously. I prefer to do a lot of my malolactic fermentation in barrel to really integrate the oak character into the wine very early. For barrels, I use French oak, medium plus toast for the most time. My personal sweet spot for Cabernet and the wine that we will be tasting too is about 18 months in barrel. At that point, the wine really retains a lot of the fruit character, while the structure really is falling into balance already, which is that kind of play is what I'm looking for. A key technique for me also is the ability to keep each vineyard and each lot separate all the way until the blending exercise. Therefore, I can really focus during aging and racking to kind of make each lot the best it can be. It's kind of like creating the perfect raw ingredients before you sit down and create your meal, so to speak. And then you kind of do that. You sit down and you have many different lots from different vineyards, and hopefully you've really captured the essence of each of those vineyards in the glass and in the barrel. And I'm trying to look when I'm working to make our Napa Cabernet Sauvignon blends to create kind of additional layers of fruit flavors and from structure as well. And the different vineyards really allow me to do that. Once blend is made, we kind of put that also physically together in the winery, obviously, and then go back to barrel to let those different characters kind of marry in for another 6 months before we bottle at around 18 months after barrel age. So all in all, for me, as I think for most of the speakers so far, it's really terroir and technique. The terroir really sets the stage. It creates the capacity and the potential of the wine. And the winemaker's techniques really how to tease out those perfect flavors out of the grapes into the wine. And at the same time, still fully expressing, what the wine can offer. I've seen some ordinary wines being made from world-class vineyards, but I've never seen a world-class wine being made from just an ordinary grapes. So the potential really has to come from the vineyard. The wine that we have here so heard it. So
yeah,
cheers. I have some wine as well. This is our limited release Napa Cab, which I think really encapsulates Napa Valley the best. It has some mountain fruit, some tannin structure in there, lots of fruit from the valley floor as well. And I think it's a quintessential Napa Valley Cab. Hope you enjoy it. And it's uniquely Napa for sure. And thanks again for having me. And come and visit us as well here at Black Stallion, or until then, maybe at blackstallionwinery.com. So cheers. Thanks, Lars, again.
Thanks, Ralph. The wine is beautiful. It's quintessential Napa. Very, very nice. All right. So now we go to Trevor Dorling, who is the GM and senior winemaker at Beaulieu Vineyard. Another native Sonoman. I understand that you were a flyboy. You were in the U.S. Air Force like your grandfather. And then you turned your eyes from the skies to the ground for your love of agriculture, science, as well as cuisine. Worked at several vineyards in Sonoma before going over to Beaulieu. And you are only the fifth chief winemaker in 117 years at BV. So tell us about the legacy of terroir and technique there. And by the way, Ralph, I have to compliment you on that. Terroir is technique. That was well stated. So Trevor.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. And I think it's been clear listening to all these fabulous presentations that there's no real clear answer to this question. At the end of the day, it's a combination of both. But I myself and we at Beaulieu have always felt like terroir is the most important thing that we need to highlight through the winemaking process. And so I spend a heck of a lot of time in the vineyard. And I think Chris said it really well earlier, which is that, the difference between, terroir is really the difference between, a good versus a truly great wine. So you do need to have really strong terroir to be able to create, world-class wines. So we are one of the oldest and longest continuously operated wineries in the Napa Valley. We were founded in 1900 by a man named Georges de la Tour. And Georges de la Tour was a Frenchman who first moved to the United States in the early 1880s. He did have a background in viticulture and winemaking, but he was really an entrepreneur at heart. And so, he actually got into the local wine business through meeting local vintners. He would travel up from San Francisco and scrape off tartrate crystals from the inside of fermentation tanks, bag them up in 100-pound bags, purify them, and sell them to the baking industry. So tartrate crystals is the same thing as cream of tartar, which is, of course, used pretty heavily in baking. He made a pretty good business during this time. So he built a great business, and he always had this strong affinity towards the Napa Valley. And I think it was that terroir that really drew him to the place. Plus the fact that it opened up to the south towards the San Francisco Bay, which of course would be very advantageous for trading and things like that. So in 1900, he sold his business called California Tartar Works, and he purchased originally 4 acres of property on the western Rutherford Bench. And when his wife first saw the property, she said, "Quel Beaulieu, what a beautiful place," which of course is what they named the vineyard and the resulting winery. So between the years of 1900 and 1903, he actually purchased the adjacent 127 acres there. And that is our original estate vineyard that we still own and farm today, called Beaulieu Vineyard Number 1. So throughout the early 1900s, Georges de la Tour had a few different businesses going on. So he first planted about 80 acres of Petit Syrah on this property, which was pretty commonly grown in the Napa Valley during this time. And he would sell a lot of the fruit. He'd make a little bit of his own wine, but he sold some of his fruit to neighboring vintners. And by this point in time, it was also well known that California, unfortunately, had an infestation of a little nasty bug that lives in the soil called phylloxera. And, this was very unfortunate because he had a little bit of experience with this back in his home vineyard just outside of Bordeaux, which completely took out that vineyard actually. But this turned out to be an advantageous thing for him to understand because he saw an opportunity here to really help the California wine industry. So he started actually importing grapevines that were grafted to phylloxera-resistant rootstocks in France over to the United States, and propagated them and acted almost as a nursery there. And so helped save quite a few vineyards around the area as well. And then the third and probably most important thing that he started doing during this time period was producing sacramental wine for the Catholic Church. And you probably know where I'm going to go with this, but fast forward a little bit later to 1920. So Prohibition happened between 1920 and 1933. Many of the wineries around the area were closing down due to Prohibition. And Georges Latour in Beaulieu, he was one of the very few vintners to not only survive this period, but to truly thrive. And he actually quadrupled the size of Beaulieu in that 13-year period, purchasing more vineyard land. And he was really, really well positioned by the time that Prohibition ended in 33. In fact, I think his annual production was about 1.2 million gallons of wine when Prohibition ended. So that was really fantastic. So because of the fact that he had grown so much, he purchased a winery that was across Highway 29 that was owned by Seneca Eure, who had passed it down to his son, Fred, who, the father was actually a California senator, and Georges Latour needed a little bit more room. So he purchased this building, originally built in 1885, purchased it in 1923, and that's where our home is today at Beaulieu. So fast forward a few years later to 1938, and by this point in time, Georges de Latour had become quite a bit older, and he really wanted to turn his focus more towards quality of wines coming out of Beaulieu and really the entire Napa Valley region in general. So he traveled back to France, went to the Pasteur Institute, and met this man, André Tellecheff, who is a very, very important figure in the California wine industry and the history of American winemaking. He was our head winemaker from 1938 until he retired in 1973. Really single-handedly revolutionized the quality of wines coming out of not only Beaulieu, but really the whole region in general. In fact, when he left in 73, there's so many other vintners that he tutored and mentored, such as Mondavi and Joe Heitz and Mike Gergish and all these great guys that came after him. In fact, he worked with Jordan, with Rob Davis at Jordan right after he left Beaulieu, and then ultimately came back as a consultant in 1991 at 90 years old. And so he's somebody that we refer to as the maestro, the father of Napa Valley Cabernet, and the dean of American winemaking. So an incredibly important figure in the history of American winemaking. He was somebody that was very, very terroir driven, right? So his view was you needed to put as much as you could into the vineyards at the beginning to make sure that you had the best grapes to make your beautiful wines with. And then once those came into the winery, it wasn't over at that point. It does take a lot of very focused winemaking, innovative winemaking skills, and a lot of attention to detail in terms of sanitation and all of those things to make sure that those beautiful grapes are shepherded into the bottle, in a very clean way, which will give you the best possible expression of that terroir. So here's a little fun quote that you can see that Georges de Latour was quoted as saying when he brought Tellecheff over, just really focusing on, that quality and really wanting to maximize that expression of terroir coming off of our beautiful vineyards. So today we take that very same winemaking approach, right? So we use traditional winemaking methods. Our main focus is to express the beautiful terroir that we're so blessed to have here in Rutherford. But we do use the latest and greatest technology in order to maximize that potential, right? So we have a variety of different tanks, ranging from different shapes of stainless steel to concrete. We do a lot of barrel fermentation. We have perfect control over temperature and circulations in order to get the best extraction of phenolics and tannins from the skins. And we do use optical sorters, like I think Chris was talking about as well, to make sure that only the best berries end up going into that tank. And the result is the best wine that we can make coming off our vineyards. So here's just a map that kind of showcases the different vineyards that we own and farm throughout the Napa Valley, which is about 1,100 acres total, roughly half of which are in the Rutherford district. So right in the middle of the valley, which is where the winery is, you can see BV Ranch number 1 right there. That was the original 130 acre property that De La Tour purchased. BV2, which is actually the vineyard that defines the southern border of Rutherford on the western side. So that's where Rutherford stops and Oakville begins. That was purchased in 1910 and then planted with Cabernet over the next few decades, and now is probably the most important vineyard that goes into Georges de La Tour Private Reserve. We do own a vineyard up in Calistoga, so BV12. That's of course the warmest part of the Napa Valley because of the fact that it's so far away from the San Francisco Bay, so you don't get that maritime influence. And then we have a few vineyards down in the Carneros district, the coolest part of the valley, where we grow Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, and lots of cool climate Merlot as well. So I just wanted to take a moment to talk about terroir as it pertains to Rutherford in particular. So
got a minute to do so.
Yep, thank you. So there's a term called Rutherford Dust that we all talk about now, and it's used to describe sensorially wines that come out of the Rutherford district. And the way that I like to describe it is, it's really kind of a forest floor, dark fruit, almost pencil shaving, really beautiful aromatic profile that exists, but it really is a textural thing on the palate to me in a stronger way. So it's kind of a cocoa powder texture and flavor profile that hits you on the mid palate and on the finish in particular, and is very distinct of Cabernet Sauvignon grown in the Rutherford district. But interestingly, it was actually Telechef that came up with this phrase at first, and he wasn't really referring to a sensory profile at all. He was talking about the terroir and the physical place and the dust itself. And he was quoted as saying that it takes Rutherford dust to grow great Cabernet, which of course, shortly after he said that, it became known as a sensory term, and it's something that somms and consumers from all over the world look for when tasting Cabernet from the Rutherford district. So our primary focus is to beautifully express that. And it's that combination of beautiful terroir in the vineyard, plus, the latest and greatest technology in winemaking.
Beautiful. Thank you, Trevor. Well stated. Gracefully done.
Thank you for having me.
Wine is beautiful, beautifully balanced cab. Really, very, very nice. Great round fruit.
We have the 17 Rutherford Cabernet, of course.
Yes.
Yeah.
We do anyway. Sorry for those who don't. So I got to tell you, two quick things. A quick bookkeeping is if Hamish is still there. It looks like the sun is starting to come up in New Zealand. There was a question for you buried in the chat. If you can look back and try to find that. I'd love to answer a ton of questions, but we're kind of short on time. But it's a great day when you start with champagne, you have some beautiful white, go through a series of great, wonderful red wines, and finish it with tequila. This is definitely the Som's dream. And this leads the way for me to introduce Juan Coronado, who himself was a Som, comes from our world. He was a mixologist and entrepreneur, opened the Bubble Lounge in San Francisco, wrote Champagne 101 for the New York Times. He was a cocktail innovator at Sortie in New York City. Sort of then took the logical step as a national brand ambassador and master ambassador to Bacardi, where he was a liaison between production and the market. And what else would you do with all that experience but start a tequila company? So Juan, please tell us about Mi Gente and the terroir and technique involved in tequila as well.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much, Lars, for the opportunity. I have to say that it's been quite a trip to be listening to all the presentations, to hear about bugs, to hear about biodiversity, to hear about sustainability and all that, because that's what tequila is all about as well. And by the way, congratulations to all of you. Great presentations. Have been very fun to hear you, and I wish I'll get one day to sit down with you and taste your wines side by side. But I'm getting buried on snow right now, so no can do. It's just a dream on the top of my head. Those 10 inches that are coming down are not easy for us right now. But thank you very much. I'm Juan Coronado. I'm one of the co-founders of Mi Gente Tequila. And it's a great pleasure to be here talking about something that is very dear to me, which is terroir. And as you guys all have explained, terroir is everything. So we are a collective of talented industry professionals that had a vision and decided to have a common goal, and that was protecting the land and respecting the people that works the land by creating harmony within our products and our industry. And we simply believe in doing well by doing right, as simple as that. And Mi Gente Tequila is, as we like to call it, designed by nature and craft by traditions. We launched in September 2020 with our Blanco tequila. And by the end of the year in December, we're lucky enough to do the final touches to our Reposado, which is another expression of it. And it has had quite a big welcome in the tequila industry. But I wanted to focus on what makes you and me very similar to all of these things. And that is definitely what we call the terroir. So in the sense of like harvesting the plants and creating an ecosystem that is gradually increasing the productivity and the potential of your raw materials, in my case, is agave. I would like to basically take a time or a second to explain what Mexico really is. In this map, I like to showcase the region of Arandas. Arandas is a town or a municipality that is located in the state of Jalisco. And in there, we are 222,000 feet above the sea level, so it's quite high. Jalisco shares the coast on the Pacific, so there's great wind connection that affects all what happens in Arandas. But if we look at Arandas, we are basically about 2 hours from the town of Jalisco and quite some good distance from the city of Mexico. It's an area that has a lot of history. There was many wars and many civilizations have been planted there because of the richness of Mexico. So for us, everything starts within the ground. For one to understand, the terroir of our product, we must first understand what Mexico truly is. This geographical location has been chosen many, many, many times by legendary tribes, across history because of its richness. We have to think about Mexico as a place where cacao, corn, chiles, tomatoes, avocados, beans are originally from. So this biodiversity is so rich and so well adapted to the soil that makes everything that grows there fantastic. Arandas is known also for cattle, for cheese. Tequila is basically nowadays the one industry that is really taking over in the town of Arandas. But I wanted to explain, there's different regions in Mexico that you can grow agave plants, the Tequilana Weber agave. And Arandas has something unique to offer, and it's due to the composition of the soil, the terroir, and the weather as well. The microclimates there are quite intense and incredible. So the Tequilana Weber is an important commercial crop to this town, and as a matter of fact, to the whole state of Jalisco. As you know, tequila is a DO, has its own denomination of origins, and it takes some time for a plant to reach out his harvesting maturity. That basically relates due to the altitude and the fluctuation in the weather. So in the town of Arandas, an agave plant will take longer to grow, but it will give us more sugar content and minerality. And that makes a big impact when the final result, which is tequila, is already produced. Moving forward, I wanted to dedicate this rough little slide to the Tierra Roja, the red soil. The land has rich history and rich nutrients. Its minerality resources are basically deposits of non-metallic elements. You get a lot of quartz, diamite, kaolin, clay. We get a lot of quartz, gravel, limestone. The highlands is a whole different region compared to all of the agave harvesting parts of Mexico. There is 5 states in Mexico that you can basically, according to the DO, extract blue Weber agave for tequila production. But look at the red of the soil. As soon as you enter the nearby areas of Arandas, you start seeing this intense red impacting soil. If you walk through the aisles of the blue Weber agave tequilas, you will see a very interesting clashing color composition. You see the red on your feet. By the way, I always like when I go to Arandas, I'm wearing Converse, those canvas Converse. When I get out of there, they're totally pink. And I'll tell you a little bit when you get to see the label of the color of a label. You can never get rid of that reddish out of your Converse, and it's quite amazing. But you see the red on the soil. You see the bluish of the plant, hence the name blue Weber agave. And then you look up, you see another hue of blue, which is the sky. When you get to see the combination of those three, it's quite a beautiful vision there you get to see between the rows of the agave. So the soil is giving us the most amazing richness and minerality for the plants to grow. We get the bricks and the sugar content. And then we have the most luckiest tool, which is our maestra tequilera, Ana Maria Romero Mena, which I have been blessed to get to know her, for the past few years. Ana Maria won last year in 2020 the award of Best Maestra Tequilera in Mexico. That's an amazing achievement. Ana Maria is quite an amazing human being. I call her the master of the senses, because she has this incredibly developed olfactory sense. Tequila compounds go from 700 to 800 on a given tequila due to the minerality and all the things that happen with it. She's able to easily identify 600 of them. And she wrote a book about, the tequila, how to recognize the olfactory elements on tequila, and quite amazing. And Ana Maria really knows how to appreciate the gift of terroir and turn it into art with us at the distillery. And at Mi Genta, we're basically, by the way, the name Mi Genta is inspired by Mi Gente, which means my people. And Mi Gente is a sustainable small batch tequila. We carefully craft the plots and select the land where we're going to harvest. We make sure we're not too far away from our distillery. We make sure the process is pretty much all around on a 360. And we follow the production steps, and we make sure that every small batch of our tequila is identical by us taking samples of the soils from the plots where we're harvesting. But there ain't nothing about harvesting if you don't have a good team of jimadores. On that picture where I am, you get to see that shoot that goes out of one of the magueys. That's a quiote. It is very important to understand that the agave fields are surrounded by a flora that is unique to the area. There is huizaches, which are like a spiny, low vegetable foliage. There is nopales, and there is cat's claw, and it's very hard to get there. You see the pencas, or the leaves of the maguey, has like thorns, and they're like very sharp. But that quiote is the flower of the plant. We only harvest on plots which the quiotes are at least at a 15 to 20%, because we wanted to allow the pollination of birds and butterflies to come in and take those seeds and genetically spread out the strength of the agave plants. And that's what we like, something that we're like really caring about it. And it's part of the biodiversity of there. Another of the things that we do on our sustainability is that with the leftovers bagasse from the extraction of the juices, we take those fibers and we like source them to companies to make paper out of it. Our labels and our packaging in the boxes is made out of agave bagasse. And that's quite incredible. From day one, we wanted to do this. We didn't remember the outcome of how our tequila was going to taste. We had a precise idea, but we're like, we need to reuse this. We need to do the 360. We need to come back to it. And we were able to do that. And sourcing the bottles was very cool too. In Mexico, we locally sourced a company that was able to use recyclable glass within their company to create these molds and bottles. So we're whole 360 right there, and we're very happy about it. So we have a strong commitment with our land and community. I wanted to introduce you to.
Well, I'm sorry, I've got to cut you off. You didn't get to hear my alarm because I was on mute, but
I didn't. All right.
Yeah.
Well,
So
this
can
is
you wrap
part
it
of
up
the
really
family and the community, and we wanted to showcase it. It's a 360 for us. Thank you very much for having me.
well done. Thank you. This is one of the worst parts of my job is having to cut beautiful speakers off, but it was all very well done. I want to thank all of you. I wish we could go through more questions and have more chats, but this has been a fantastic panel. You guys really took what could be a simple or could be a complicated topic and addressed it extremely well. I want to thank each and every one of you and thank the 145 people that tuned in today. It was great, and we hope you got some great education out of it. Thank you all very much. We will see you March 18th when we go to Italy North and South. Cheers. Thanks. The recording of this will be available at somjournal.com as well as on SomGo. So you can catch up on that, and there'll be, of course, a recap in the Som Journal. Thanks all. Take care.
Lars, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.